This is a new ministry which is just starting. Reverend Hood needs your help in sharing the good news of Jesus Christ and his power throughout the world. If you would be so kind as to send a donation to Nicholas Hood III Ministries of any amount, Reverend Hood will send you a free complimentary copy of his book of original personal prayers and beautiful photographs entitled The Test, The Strength, The Endurance, and The Way Out.
Tomorrow we celebrate Easter. Christians worldwide will pause to praise God for Jesus Christ, who was crucified on a cross on Good Friday, but Easter Sunday, he rose from the grave. And I want to break this down for you in a way that I hope will be easy for you to digest, easy for you to understand why Easter is such a significant moment in the life of the Christian church. In the Matthew version of the life of Jesus, the Gospel of Matthew, the 28th chapter, there's a story where it tells us that Mary Magdalene, who was healed of her sins by Jesus, and the other Mary, I presume that other Mary is the sister of Martha and Lazarus. But early Easter Sunday morning, they set out from their little safe house in Jerusalem and Bethany. They set out from there to the tomb of Jesus. They want to see where Jesus was buried. And before they can get to the tomb, they find that the stone that covered the tomb has rolled away. The stone has rolled away. An angel dressed in white, dazzling white, bright lights, says, "Do not be afraid. I know that you've come seeking Jesus, but he is not here, for he is risen, just as he said he would. He is risen, and he will meet the disciples in Galilee. Go back and tell the disciples that Jesus is in Galilee, just as he told them he would be." And the two Marys are overwhelmed with joy, but they're also confused. They look inside and they see that the tomb is open. And the way the tombs work, I've been there. What it shows, you've got a couple of competing sites in Jerusalem today where they believe the tomb of Jesus was. One is in the Church of the Open Holy Sepulchre, which is a church which is built on top of what looks like catacombs, where there's several little caves. And the cave where they think that Jesus was laid, it's stone, and there are two compartments. You have the first compartment and an adjoining compartment, and there's a little opening where you can walk from one to the other. And you can see the slab where Jesus' body was said to be laid. There's another site which is also thought to be a place where Jesus was buried. Unfortunately, we don't really know definitively which one of these is right. But Christians worldwide line up, sometimes for hours, to go in and to see the tomb of Jesus. And so the two Marys go to the tomb early in the morning. The sun is just starting to come up, and they encounter an angel. The angel says, "Do not be afraid. I know you've come here to see the tomb of Jesus, but he is risen. He is not here. Go to Galilee, tell the disciples to meet him in Galilee, and there they will be rejoined." And so the Marys are overjoyed. They turn around, and as they are heading out from the graveyard, Mary sees Jesus, and she wants to hold him. And he says, "Do not hold me, for I have not yet ascended to my Father who is in heaven. But go to Galilee, tell the disciples to go to Galilee, and I will meet them there." Now, some people will ask, Why did Jesus have to die? Number one. Number two, why did Jesus, and not necessarily in this order, but another question is, why did Jesus have to come to earth? I actually sat down with a group of 12-year-olds last Sunday at my church. Actually, I took them to my home. They've been coming to my home during this whole Lenten season because they're learning about the church. They're learning what it means to be a member of the church. And then on Easter Sunday, they will be confirmed as members of the church. And so, I'm sitting and talking with them, and I raise that same question. Why do you think Jesus came to earth? And it was just precious to hear the children begin to break it down. The little girl said, God is the creator of the world, and God is the creator of the universe, but people didn't really understand what God is all about. And so God came to earth in the form of the little baby Jesus. I said, you are absolutely right. I said, you couldn't get any better than that. And I talked with them and about, what is the significance of God coming to earth in the form of a baby Jesus? And number one, people didn't really understand God. People were confused about God. People had their own ideas about God. And so God came to earth in the form of a little precious baby through his mother Mary, his earthly father Joseph. They raised the little baby Jesus. But this baby Jesus was no ordinary baby, because this baby is the Son of God. And as this little baby Jesus grew, Jesus became what we have come to know as the Messiah, the long-awaited one, who came to earth for the sins of the world. And Jesus Christ came to earth to show you and me how to live, to show you and me how to love, to show you and me how to forgive, to show you and me how to have self-control, to show you and me how to live life with power, but also grace and mercy and tenderness at the same time. And this is what galvanized the church. And so Mary go back to the disciples, and they tell them, Jesus is not in the tomb. And the disciples can't believe this because they saw him die a certified death. And what do I mean by a certified death? They saw Jesus on a cross with his hands nailed to the wood. They saw Jesus on a cross with his feet nailed to the wood. They saw Jesus on a cross where a soldier had stabbed him in the side to hasten his death. They saw Jesus give up the ghost. They saw him hang his head and say, Father, into thy hands I commit thy spirit. They saw Jesus die and say, it is finished. And he died a certified death. And so for Jesus to die with his limp body on the cross, taken down from the cross, with no breath, no life in that body, and they saw Jesus' body put into a tomb, and they saw the tomb sealed up. There's no denying that Jesus died. But there on Easter Sunday, 3 days later, they go to the tomb that was sealed with a heavy rock has now been opened up. The rock is rolled away, and Jesus is not there. And they thought that somebody maybe had some malintent and had moved the body. But the angel of the Lord came down and talked to the two Marys and said, do not be afraid. He is not here. He is risen, just as he said he would do. He's in Galilee. Tell the other disciples to meet him in Galilee. and there they can chart out the next course of operation. And so I want to talk about this. You know, number one, why did Mary and Mary go to the tomb? And I think they went to the tomb for the same reasons why you and I like to go to the graveyard. Now, maybe somebody here really has never gone to the graveyard to hang out. But the graveyard is a good place sometimes for a person who is grieving to just step away from your regular routine. You go to the grave and you can meditate. You go to the grave, you think about your loved one who has died. You go to the grave and you pray for them. When I was a little boy in New Orleans on All Saints' Day, we used to go to the cemeteries. And for the life of me, I don't know whose graves we were cleaning, but in New Orleans, that's a big tradition, even today, where you go with your brooms, your rake, you rake away the leaves, the overgrown grass, because the graves in New Orleans are above ground. You know, New Orleans is 6 feet below sea level. And so the graveyard could be messy. But as a little boy, I remember going on All Saints' Day to clean the graves. In Detroit, I never really went to the graves, even though I'm a minister. And you might say, well, don't you go to the grave as a minister? I said, well, yeah, I go. When we have a funeral and there's a burial, I go to the graveyard. But just to go to the grave and to hang out, I didn't really do that much until my brother Emery died. Emery was the brother who was 2 years younger than I. And, my family, years ago when I first got married, my father asked me and my wife if we would help him buy 6 grave plots. And we were thinking about family members. And as you know, you never know how your family's going to work out. But in my family, my mother died. My brother Emery died. My other brother Steve died. My sister Sarah died. My dad died. I'm the last one standing in the family. But we had bought 6 graves, and we're going to have to buy some more because we've run out of graves. But when Emery died, he's the brother who's 2 years younger than me. And he's the brother who, until I was 17, I shared a bedroom with him. We had bunk beds. Sometimes the beds were taken down from the bunk, and one would sleep to the right, one would sleep to the left. When they were bunk beds, one was above, one was below. But Emery died. And when Emery died, after having an appropriate funeral for him, I went to the grave. I remember riding my bike to the grave, and the cemetery is a couple miles from my house, but a couple miles on a bicycle is not very far. And so I rode my bike to the graveyard. Our little plots are in the back of the graveyard, the Elmwood Cemetery in Detroit. And I rode up the little incline, and when I got to where our family plot is, I got off the bike, I walked over to Emery's grave, I sat down maybe 6 feet, 10 feet in front of his grave. He has a little headstone. And I began to pray to God. And I found myself praying that the Lord would look beyond his sins, that the Lord would be merciful upon my brother, that the Lord would have a place in heaven for my brother. And sidebar, my brother was kind of a character. And he had lived a riotous life in many respects, but he was a delightful character. I don't know if anybody of you have any relatives who are delightful, who are a character. And he was a delightful character. And I knew, a lot of good things about him. So I'm sitting on the ground praying to the Lord for the soul of my brother. And as I'm praying for the soul of my brother, the thought crossed my mind. I said, Nick, do you realize you're praying for your brother's soul to get into heaven? Look down. And I looked down and I said, do you realize that you're sitting on your own grave? And I jumped up off the ground and I ran over to my bike and got on the bike and I rode as fast as I could back home. And I laughed the whole way home. And I said, Nick, this is the last time you're going to pray for Emery's soul. You ought to pray for your own soul and make sure you get your own big 2 feet into heaven. But that's my little story about going to sit in the graveyard. But what I found in that experience was that there's something comforting about the grave. There can be something very reassuring and peaceful about being in a graveyard. So I don't mock anybody who takes a little time out to go to the grave. And you should not feel guilty if you find solace in the graveyard. That's what I found. And so the 2 Marys go to the grave. In the Matthew version of the death of Jesus, they do not say that Mary and Mary went to anoint the body of Jesus. In some of the other versions, it says in quite explicit detail, they went to the grave to anoint the body of Jesus. But in the Matthew version, it doesn't say that. It just says they go to see the tomb of Jesus. And that's okay if you want to do that. The 2 Marys are confronted by an angel. They turn around and they start to go home. They realize that the grave is open, that the prophecy of Jesus was real, and that Jesus is still alive. They can't believe it. And then on top of that, Mary Magdalene runs into Jesus in the graveyard. And when she runs into him, she wants to hold Jesus, hold him by the feet. And Jesus says, don't touch me, because I have not yet ascended to my Father who is in heaven. And so he says, but go back and tell Peter and tell the others that you have seen me and to meet me in the Galilee. And why do you think Jesus told the disciples to meet me in Galilee? I think he told them to meet him in Galilee because the Galilee was his comfort zone. And not just his comfort zone, it was the comfort zone of the other disciples. The Galilee is where they're from. When he says the Galilee, that's also known as the Sea of Galilee. We call it the Sea of Galilee, but to me it's like a big lake. And I don't say that disparagingly. It's the second largest repository of fresh water in the whole world. So it's might as well be a sea. It's got a lot of fish in it. And I've eaten fish from the Sea of Galilee. But that's where the disciples, that's where Jesus is from. And the Galilee, I believe, represented the comfort zone for the disciples. And in each of our lives, there ought to be a comfort zone. And what do I mean by that? What I mean is that there ought to be some place, somewhere, that makes you feel good just to be. And that's nothing to be ashamed of. It's not anything to be ashamed of to have a place where you're comfortable, a place where you find peace and solace. For years, I used to think that my comfort zone was New Orleans. Matter of fact, early in my marriage, we're in our 49th year now, but early in my marriage, I heard somebody ask my wife the question, where do you and Nick like to go for a vacation? And my wife would just immediately say, Nick thinks that going to New Orleans is the place where he likes to vacation. But it's not like what you might think. For people who live in New Orleans, who are from New Orleans, the Mardi Gras is just one part of New Orleans. New Orleans has a very spiritual aura about it. The people who live in New Orleans are in many cases, very spirit-filled. They're focused on God. They live peaceful lives. The communities are warm. They're loving. A lot of people know people in the neighborhoods and so forth. It's a great place. And for many people who are from New Orleans, one of the last places they want to go is the French Quarter, because the French Quarter is where a lot of the outsiders come. They get drunk, they carouse, and so forth. And for me, going to New Orleans was always comfort and a comfort zone. But it was a comfort zone not just because of the neighborhoods, but because of the people who were there. And as I've gotten older, what I realized is that the thing that I thought was a comfort zone is really, it was the people. And most of the people I knew coming up in New Orleans are gone now. And so I have to create new comfort zones. But for Jesus and the disciples, the Galilee was the comfort zone. And he told the disciples, when I am crucified, I will rise from the grave. And when I rise from the grave, I will meet you in the Galilee. And maybe in a couple weeks, I'll talk to you about part of what happens when Jesus meets the disciples in the Galilee. But that first Easter Sunday, Jesus, through a revelation to the two Marys, lets the disciples know, I'm still alive. You saw me die on a cross. You saw me take my last breath, saying, Father, into thy hands I commit thy spirit. You saw me say, it is finished. You saw me give up the Holy Ghost. You saw Joseph of Arimathea take my limp, dead body down from the cross and to put it in a fresh, new grave that he has bought. You know that I died, but I want you to know that I am alive. And I will be with you soon. And so, my friends, the good news of Easter is that Jesus is alive. And why is this good news? Because God came to earth to encourage you and me that by following God, number one, we have a pathway to the best life possible right here on earth. A life of love, a life of kindness, a life of patience, a life of self-control, a life of graciousness, a life of mercy and justice and peace and equity, equality for all, a life where we could get along with people of diverse cultures and backgrounds. But also, in addition to that good life here on earth, there's an even better life in the life everlasting, in that kingdom which has no end. And that's why God came to earth in the form of a baby Jesus, to show you and me that it is worthwhile to follow God. It is worthwhile to trust God. It is worthwhile to love God. And it is worthwhile to try to live like God, because we've seen God. We've read about God in Jesus Christ. And we know that God is real. And he's real and worthwhile in this life right now. My friends, I'm going to take a break, but we'll be back in a minute. And when we come back, I'm going to talk a little bit more about this crucified and risen Lord. Stick around, and I'll be right back.
This is a new ministry which is just starting. Reverend Hood needs your help in sharing the good news of Jesus Christ and his power throughout the world. If you would be so kind as to send a donation to Nicholas Hood III Ministries of any amount, Reverend Hood will send you a free complimentary copy of his book of original personal prayers and beautiful photographs entitled The Test, The Strength, The Endurance, and The Way Out.
And the point that I'm making is that in everybody's life, at some point, there's a plan B. God is talking to us every step of the way. God is trying to show you something every step of the way. When things seem to be going wrong, that's God's way of... Let me share with you a couple of interesting and beautiful thoughts about that first Easter. Number one, Mary and Mary returned to the disciples, And they share the good news that Jesus has risen from death. He died, but he's alive. But guess who else testified to Jesus being alive? The Roman soldiers who were commissioned to stay there to guard the tomb. You know, there's an earthquake, and it's the soldiers who are terrified because of the earthquake. It's the soldiers who are terrified because of the angel, and they go back to the chief priests to tell them what they've seen, and the chief priests and those around them come up with money to bribe the soldiers not to tell what they've seen. And isn't that interesting? God is working through the soldiers who could care less about God. They could care less about Jesus. But God made witnesses out of those soldiers, just like God made a witness out of Mary and the 12 disciples. And the lesson in this, my friends, is that if God could use a Roman soldier to spread the word of Jesus, God can use you. And one of the greatest gifts you and I can give to God is simply to testify to somebody. Call a friend. Tell them that Jesus is real. If you like this program, if it's meant anything to you at all, just pick up the phone and call a friend and tell them Jesus is alive this Easter Sunday. God bless, God keep you, and thanks so much for watching this program today. I'm praying for you. Blessings.
America used to be considered a godly country. It doesn't seem to be that way to me now. And I don't mean to be disrespectful or anything, but it's so many things they're okaying for the wrong reasons. There's not godly reason. People need to really open up the Bible, the Bible, and look in it and really get it into their heart. And this, the way the Reverend Hood is doing this is a comfortable way. It's not forcing anything on people. It's a comfortable way and a loving way for it to continue to move in that direction.
The way Reverend Hood presents it, you can understand it, and it makes you want to delve into the Bible even more so that you can see more, because it seems like the program goes off too fast. We need the bread of life.
We really do.
These days, we need it more than ever. And Reverend Hood's ministry on TV is giving us our bread.
This is a new ministry which is just starting. Reverend Hood needs your help in sharing the good news of Jesus Christ and his power throughout the world. If you would be so kind as to send a donation to Nicholas Hood III Ministries of any amount, Reverend Hood will send you a free complimentary copy of his book of original personal prayers and beautiful photographs entitled The Test, The Strength, The Endurance, and The Way Out.